everyone, and welcome back to Mongabay's webinar series for journalists. I'm your host and moderator for today's discussion. My name is Mike DiGirolamo, and I'm broadcasting to you from Gadigal land in the Eora Nation. So this webinar, if you're viewing it, is on both YouTube and on LinkedIn. But after the broadcast is over, it will remain on YouTube in perpetuity with timestamps and resources shared in the show notes. If you would like to know more about our webinar series and keep up to date when we have announcements, you can subscribe to our webinar newsletter by going to mongabay.com and clicking on the newsletter button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. It'll give you some options, and one of those will be the webinar newsletter. So go ahead and subscribe to that. So today's webinar topic is how to cover nature crime. So these are illegal activities that impact both ecosystems and the people that inhabit them. And while this topic is really large and quite broad and it impacts many regions, we're going to be focusing on nature crime in both Latin America and Indonesia. And today's discussion will use reporting that's been conducted by Mongabay's Nature Crime Fellows in those two locations. So just a quick reminder for anyone interested in contributing to Mongabay, we always are seeking your pitches. So if you have a story idea that you want to share with us, go to mongabay.org and then click on the opportunities button, scroll down and find Pitch Mongabay a Story and follow the instructions there. And if you don't pitch your story idea to us, we always encourage you to pitch it to other outlets as well. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panel, starting with Daniela Quintero Díaz. She is a journalist and sociologist based in Bogota, Colombia, with 7 years of reporting experience. And she's conducted in-depth investigations that uncover harmful and illegal practices that threaten biodiversity ecosystems and communities. And also joining us is Richaldo Hariandja. He goes by Rico, and he is a journalist based in Jakarta who has focused on environmental issues for more than 9 years. And he has worked with many publications from local to the international, including Mongabay, Indonesia, since 2020. So if we have time at the end of today's discussion, I will reserve some time, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes for audience questions. But because of the specific nature of the topic today, we will dedicate most of the time to discussing these investigations. But if you think of a question while we're speaking, go ahead and drop it in the chat and we'll do our best to address it at the end. So with that said, let us go ahead and get started with the first question. So let's define first what nature crime is and what kinds of nature crime we're going to discuss today. So panel, what is nature crime? I know it sounds like an obvious question, but let's go ahead and lay the groundwork here and what kinds of illegal activity we're going to cover today.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be part of this panel and to share more about the Nature Crime Fellowship in Latin America. So as you were mentioning, in general, when we talk about environmental crimes, we refer to activities that violate environmental laws or that cause damage to ecosystems and to communities that live in or around those ecosystems. The most common examples include illegal logging or the impact of extractive industries like oil companies or mining or cattle ranching. Also, it could be like fires or water contamination. However, in Latin America, we have seen that these crimes are no longer just about that classic environmental damage. They are now closely linked to criminal organizations and networks that profit from illegal exploitation of natural resources. So that's why part of our focus in Latin America and in our fellowship was to better understand the role of organized crime behind those activities.
Enrico, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Daniela have answered all of the question, but in Indonesia, nature crime is related to the government itself. We found that on our investigation that the nature crime is related to the violation of the policy by the government, and also how the government let the nature destroyed by everything that they have been regulated.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, we're just going to give a brief overview of several of these investigative reports. So to start with, Daniela and Rico, can you just describe what the objectives of the Nature Crime Fellows were? And you already touched upon some of those, and how specifically they were supported by Mongabay. Like, what were some of the tools that were involved, and what is our audience going to learn about these stories today?
I don't know if Rico want to go or if I'll go first.
Go ahead, Daniela.
Okay, because I'll share my screen for a bit. So let me see first. Because first, I would like to introduce our fellows. There are Pilar, Jose, Diego, Elizabeth, and Enrique, and they are from Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. Our goal in Latin America was to help these selected journalists to improve their ability to investigate environmental crimes that are affecting not only the Amazon, but also the oceans. Because we truly believe that in contexts like ours, journalists need to develop new skills to understand what's happening on the ground. So during the first 6 or 7 months of the fellowship, we designed and delivered a series of online and in-person workshops and training sessions, as the ones you can see on the presentation. So we taught them, for example, how to use satellite analysis to see the expansion of illegal mining or deforestation, and also how to use platforms like Global Fishing Watch to track vessels that were operating near our marine protected areas. We also show them how to use high quality scientific papers to strengthen their investigations. And we invited experienced journalists to share successful investigation that could help us inspire our work. So what you'll see today are like a combination of stories that also combine these digital and investigative tools with traditional reporting methods like field reporting, when it's possible, of course, interviews with local communities, with authorities, with experts. But I'd also like to highlight one important thing, and is that all of these investigations that are in Spanish, of course, they rely heavily on satellite data, on maps and on visualizations, because it was like a really important part of our work. So as I mentioned earlier, this really helped us to explain what is happening on the ground, especially because many of these areas where we make our coverage are of extremely difficult access. So I think that's important to start. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Daniela. And Rico, did you want to go ahead and preview your team's work?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. In Mongabay, Indonesia, the nature crime investigation we conduct, the objective is to uncover where was the wrongdoing by the government, how they let the nature being destroyed by their regulation and permit they made. So before each fellows or each journalist going to the field for the investigation, we conducted several workshop, like the one that I'm gonna share with you is investigation inside the national park of Kerinci Seblat in Jambi, in the Sumatra Island. Before our journalists going to the field, we conduct the workshop with several NGOs that have been work with the related issues, such as the contamination from the mining activities, where the where everything is contaminated by the mercury from the activities, and the journalists learn how to prepare themselves, how to make a preventive step before they go into the field, and also we have a workshop with the GIS expert. We learn about how to cover investigation using a spatial method. So they learn how to take their position, uh, take their findings, such as a mine site, paddy fields, and also like if they found an excavator. So after that, we will produce their findings, hyperlink it into the articles, so the readers will know the exact location of their findings from our journalists.
Great. Thank you very much, Rico. So the first story we're going to focus on today is along the Santiago River. So Mongabay Latam visited indigenous communities that were affected by illegal mining and logging along the Santiago River in the Amazonas region of Peru. So, Daniela, can you describe the process of reporting this story? Like how long it took, the preparation that was involved, and the challenges that you experienced along the way? And it also appears that, you know, aerial and on the ground footage played a really significant role in this investigation, which in those photos were also published separately. So if you could explain the reason behind that format, that would be really helpful as well.
Sure, Mike. I would like to share my screen again. I'd like to start saying that for this particular story, the preparation process was extremely careful and detailed, and it took several months for many reasons. First, the Santiago River, as you mentioned, is a highly conflict-affected area in the Peruvian Amazon where multiple environmental crimes take place. So security measures had to be taken very seriously. Just, for example, months before our field visit, illegal miners opened fire on a boat carrying 60 indigenous leaders who were trying to stop illegal mining in their territory. So at Mongabay Latam, we follow a safety protocol where we first assess whether field reporting is actually viable. And when we decide it is, we maintain remote monitoring of the reporting during the whole trip. So we keep track of the route of, I'll show you here more, the route that Enrique, that was the one who covered this story, made. So we keep track of them in the route. We check their arrival points. We know the places where they will have connectivity. And we also have local emergency contacts that we could reach in case anything happens. So in addition to that, I think it's important to mention that this story took place in the One Piece Indigenous territory. So it was also essential for us to coordinate with them our participation and our presence in the territory. We were fortunate because the journalist Enrique had built like a really strong relationship of trust with the communities over several years. So that made it much easier to define how to enter and report without putting the local people at risk and our journalists. So for the second part of your question, the journalist was working with a photographer slash filmmaker whose work became really important, or a really important part of the investigation. Not only because during the field reporting, they were able to document illegal mining, as the one you can see in this video, but also they could see illegal timber extraction inside the One Piece territory. So they identify where this illegal timber extraction was taking place. And then, as you can see here in this presentation, they followed the boat that was moving the wood all the way down to the river until it reached the port. At the port, the timber was loaded onto a truck and it was transported to major cities. So this allowed us to reconstruct part of the route that the illegal timber trade is taking place in the Peruvian Amazon, that you can see here in this map as it moves from the Santiago River to other main cities along the country. But also, as you mentioned, one of our goals was to make these investigations accessible to different audiences and across different formats. So we often produce videos and social media content and follow-up stories and photo essays like the one you mentioned. And the idea is to help this information reach a bigger audience.
Great, thank you very much, Daniela. That was really insightful. And we're going to hop now into some of the investigations that the Mongabay Indonesia Bureau has been working on. Enrico, you already sort of detailed, you gave us a small preview of those. So the first one that we're going to talk about, I believe, is the Kerinci Seblat case that you just mentioned, where it appears that there's some findings, some initial findings from this investigation that highlight illegal gold mining. But there are other illegal activities that are occurring in there as well. There's some mercury contamination, and also people who have bought gold from this mine have ties to the government in Jambi. So can you share with our listeners how you uncovered these ties, what challenges you faced in reporting this story, and how you verified this information?
Okay, thanks, Mike. So our journalists found the relationship between the illegal gold mining with the government by doing a desk research and field investigation. So he read the court of ruling from a late case about the mining activities that the police have been take over it, and he also got an information from the incitement from the police station, and also interviewed with the workers on the site. So we know it's a risky and sensitive topic. It even forced him to use another identity to get information about this. So he used a cover as a researcher for the investigation. And our biggest challenge for this investigation is communication with our journalist during his trip, because he needs to go inside the forest for several days without signal or effective communication devices. We have a security measure. We have a security measure report before they go to the field. So it's kind of frustrating for us when we didn't get a news from him past the time that we agreed before. But luckily, he's okay and got everything that he needs from the field reporting. And we conduct strict verification for the information we got, especially when it's involving government-related person. We did it at the end of the article production process. We sent a letter and conducted an interview, but we have to make sure that every time he did it, he wasn't alone. Like he needs to accompanied with another person when he met someone from the government, just in case from the worst.
Is there anything else about that story that you want to touch upon? Because we are going to talk about the next one in Kutai National Park, but I understand that you're just giving us a preview and the story still has yet to be published, correct?
Yeah. So besides everything that I've been mentioned before, I think I'm gonna share you about the key findings from the illegal mining activities inside Kerinci Seblat National Park. The first is it's interesting how the activities is like an organized activity. Like every miners have an early warning system. So like there will be a group that stay in the signal-friendly zone, and they will get an alert from their network on the field nearby when there's a possible national park rangers patrol to give an alert to the mining inside the forest. And also there's it's involving the illegal gasoline. Our journalists found that one excavator needs about 1 to 2 barrels of gasoline. So they need about 20 barrels every time they go inside the forest. And the gasoline also came from the illegal mining inside the forest. And the activity began in 2013. They started with a small group using small tools like a gold panner. Now they use an excavator to dig gold from the river bodies. From then, because of the massive activities on the river bodies, several villages get flooded every time heavy rain came. In 2026 itself, about 28 villagers affected. It it's only from one region, and also most of the yeah, like I said, most of the excavators supplied by the person related to the government or military. So, like uh, the person that related to government give the money for the miners to go inside the forest uh, and support him or her with an excavator. So, and also we found a contamination on the river near the mining site. I think that's the initial finding that I can share with you for now, because the article itself is still ongoing.
Thank you very much, Rico. And with that said, we're gonna now pivot to another investigation that your team is currently working on in Kutai National Park, and this has to do specifically with coal mining, but its impacts are affecting an orangutan habitat. So, what were some of the unique challenges that this story presented, and how did your reporters manage them?
Okay, thanks, Mike. So, what interesting about the Kutai National Park investigation is the initial goals for the investigation is to find the uh, illegal activities inside the national park, which is inside the mining permit. So the mining permit itself is overlaying the Kutai National Park. So our journalists going to the field to see if there's any activities inside the national park. We want to uncover our hypothesis about the illegal mining activities inside the national park is related to the companies, but she found that the site is really hard to get. About she needs to go to the forest for 2 to 3 days, but cannot reach the mining site. So we need to readjust. What the field reporting. So so we try to find another activities on the other side of the national park, which is about on the north of the national park, and we found that in that site, the second site, uh, the illegal activities is related to the permit that the government gave to the religious organization. We found that this is the big issues because we journalists and also civil societies in Indonesia believes that the permit that the government gave to the religious organization is like a present from the government for the organization because their support during the election. And we found that the permit also consume part of the national park, including the orangutan sanctuary.
Is there anything else about the story that you want to explain for our audience before we move on to the next investigation from Mongabay Latam? Because it sounds like this was quite different from the previous investigation. So if there's anything else that you want to emphasize to viewers right now about how to report a story like this, then that would be might be a good time to highlight that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, you're right that the two stories is quite different because one is related to the person, political exposure person from the local government, and the other side is related to the political exposure person from the national government. So and also this one have a two key habitat. Two key habitat. One is in Kerinci in Kerinci Seblat is related to the habitat of the tiger, and the other in Kalimantan in Kutai National Park related to the orangutan. And we believe that, but two of the stories is quite similar with the how the government violate the regulation, and also uh, how the government violate the permit. So we believe that everything is related to the lack of the consistency from the government to protect the nature, and everything is happened because the government give a permit and allow them to happen.
Thank you very much, Rico, and we all look forward to the publication of your findings. Daniela, we're gonna now touch on the case of the Nukak Reserve in Colombia. So, in the department of Guaviare, there is an illegal 47.5 kilometer road that's been used for drug trafficking. And Mongabay Latam documented the impact this road would have on the Nukak Reserve, which is an indigenous territory that has lost more than 36,000 hectares of forest between 1990 and the first half of 2025. And so you've also documented that the Nukak and indigenous people have faced forced recruitment and displacement. So that's a lot to uncover. What tools were used in reporting the story, and can you outline the process and also the preparation for embarking on this?
Sure, Mike. Thank you. As I mentioned before, maps and geographic analysis have been central to most of our investigations. I'm sharing also my screen too here. In this case, especially, it was really important to use maps because the illegal road that we were mapping or that we were investigating is actually hidden under dense forest. So as you can see in this picture, it's not like a major road, but a narrow path that is already causing those impacts that you were mentioning. No, the reserve it's having like a lot of deforestation, and coca crops are advancing during the year. So for many years, this path that you're seeing in the picture was traditionally used by the Nukak indigenous people to move across the territory, to visit sacred places, and to gather food. But as the armed conflict intensified and because of the strategic location of the route, that as you can see in this map connects two main rivers in the Colombian Amazon, it became a key corridor for drug trafficking. So this has led to displacement, deforestation, and the expansion of illegal coca crops inside and around the reserve. So how did we approach this story? First, we georeferenced the road, and then we cross-checked that information with satellite data on deforestation alerts and on coca crops. As you can see in these pictures, this is how deforestation is advancing in the reserve through the years. So that allowed us to document the impacts that were linked to the road inside the reserve. We also, as you can see here, like mapped where were the coca crops taking place in the reserve and what were like the impacts of the road, 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and 50 kilometers from the road. The green dots that you see in the map are the coca crops, and the red dots are like the advance of deforestation through the years. So beyond that, we also carried out field reporting and traveled as close as we could to be safe, but near the road and near the indigenous people. Because as you were mentioning, Mike, the Guaviare department is like a highly dangerous area that is disputed between different illegal armed groups. So it was like a main challenge to interview indigenous communities and local residents and even authorities and experts that work in the field. And in many cases, we decided to protect their identities and to avoid, because we needed to avoid putting them on risk.
So, can you talk more about the relationship building aspect with local and indigenous people, and how this aided the story? How exactly did this help you uncover the findings that you did?
Yes, so almost all the stories that we report take place in territories where indigenous people live. In fact, this is one of the central focuses of Mongabay Latam coverage. And over the years, we have learned to respect how indigenous organizations operate in their local levels and in their national levels. So, one of our starting points is that we never entered to a community or indigenous territory for field reporting without first speaking with the local authorities and the indigenous leader. So, we hold several conversations and try to understand both the situation on the ground and the level of risk for them and for us. And then we evaluate the possibility to be in the field. So in this case, with the Nukak people, this was especially complex because, as we were talking before, the Guaviare department, where the Nukak Reserve is located, is currently one of the most conflictive zones in Colombia. And many Nukak people are afraid to speak. So I think this question is also an important moment and an important, yeah, place to emphasize that in general, where environmental crimes are happening, there are also indigenous communities and many people living under fear and pressure. And sadly, these environmental crimes not only harm ecosystem, but also lead to the killings of environmental defenders and indigenous leaders, especially in Latin America, considering that our region is like the most dangerous region in the world to be an environmental defender. Last year, for example, in Colombia, where I'm from, we recorded 48 killings of environmental leaders according to the Global Witness report. So even though we believe these are extremely important stories to tell, it is also our responsibility not to expose them to further threats. Sometimes that means making careful decisions about which stories we can report and so how we report them, because in some cases it's better to report from distance or to rely on indigenous sources who are living in cities and are not longer directly exposed to the same level of risk that the ones that are in the territory. And sometimes, of course, we choose not to name the sources or the communities at all. So being able to do that also relies on the trust we have built with our audience and with the communities, indigenous communities. So for us, what matters most is like finding a responsible way to tell these stories without putting them at risk.
That's this is actually a really good place for me to pose this question, and both of you can answer this. But can you explain, do you, and if you do, how do you do follow-up reporting with with sources that you've spoken to see what has happened after the investigation is released. Can you explain how that works?
I can go if you want, Rico. Yes, so we usually keep in touch with the people in the territory, not just when we publish, but the months after that, because we need to keep tracking what's happening. So, for example, some time ago, we published an investigation about 67 airstrips that were used for drug trafficking in the Peruvian Amazon and that were located within or near indigenous territories. This was a really huge investigation, but part of the process was to maintain contact with the people in the territory to see what was happening. And we were like all the time telling them that the publication was going to be on air soon and that they could alert us if something was happening. So we usually keep in touch for several months after we publish the story to see if anything has happened and if we need to adjust some of our protocols or to make some actions to help protect the people that live in the territory. Usually, of course, as I mentioned before, what we try to do when these cases are extremely dangerous is to protect the names of the sources or to not say the names of the communities to which we were doing our reporting. That's mostly what we do when we publish this kind of investigations.
Enrico, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar with what Daniela have done before. So, uh, according to our experience, I cannot talk about the natural crime because it's still ongoing and in the process. But according to our experience, from our recent investigation, we still have a contact and yeah, we still have a contact with our sources on the field. So and they usually give us about the update on the location. If there is something that we need to highlight more, we're gonna have and make an article or news, another news about that. So and also we still have we still keep a contact with our sources because it is essential for us to not let him or her being alone with what they experience on the field.
Great, thank you for answering that. So we have another investigation to highlight, and this one is in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So 8 criminal groups operate in the Ecuadorian Amazon, according to a recent territorial mapping carried out by Mongabay Latam. So this investigation also found that 12 protected areas had open pit mining in them, and 105 indigenous communities were impacted by this mining, and 569 were impacted by deforestation. So this really appears to be an enormous mapping project. Daniela, can you describe what tools were used in this investigation and how you ground truthed this data?
Sure, Mike. I'd like to start by saying that until now, environmental crimes in the Ecuadorian Amazon had never really been mapped in this level of detail. So, as you mentioned, this investigation documented the expansion of mining and deforestation in protected areas and indigenous territories, but it also revealed the presence of at least 8 different organized crime groups that were operating in the area, not only Ecuadorian groups, but also international groups or Colombian groups. So it was very challenging. It was a very challenging project because of its scale. As you can see in this map, it was like a huge portion of land that we were covering. And of course, because of the security risks involved and its difficult access in the ground and on reliable geographic data. So beyond the tools I have already mentioned in this webinar, like the maps and the satellite images, I would like to highlight 2 key aspects of this investigation. First, instead of traveling to the area, we work closely with local journalists who know their territory, who have sources on the ground, and that are in regular contact with the police, the military officials, and other authorities. This was extremely valuable because it allowed us to verify through at least three different sources where these criminal groups were operating, and also what kinds of activities they were carrying out. So as you can see in this map, this is a protected area or a protected corridor that connects different protected areas. And the orange dots show the advance on mining activities in or around those protected areas. So I think that work that the journalists help us do in territory was really important to support this mapping information. But also, the access actually to this geographic data was very limited. So we partnered with an NGO, a local NGO that's called Ecociencia, which has spent years carefully monitoring deforestation and mining and road expansion in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So they shared their data with us, and that became essential for developing also the investigation. Once we gather all this information, we work with a geographer to integrate all those layers, and the result was this visualization that you're seeing in the presentation. We not only highlights like the more critical mining hotspot, but also shows, as you can see in this map, the presence of different armed and criminal groups that are operating in the region. So at the end of the visualization, there's like a full map with the whole information where you can like navigate and zoom in and zoom out and see what's happened in each territory, indigenous communities, and well, the protected areas. So the green ones are protected areas from Ecuador. The guns reflect the armed groups that have presence in the zone, and the blue ones are indigenous territories that are in the Ecuador Amazonia. Also, the red dots is the advance of deforestation, and the orange that you can see more closely advancing in protected areas is the mining. So this was like basically all the work that we done to map what was happening in the Ecuadorian Amazon. As I was mentioning at the beginning, we use like this satellite information, but we also rely on the traditional coverage by the help with the local journalists in that zones of the Ecuador Amazon.
Great. Thank you very much, Daniela. Before we get to like summarizing key points and things that for reporters to keep in mind, I think it's important for us to take some time discussing risk assessments, because obviously reporting on criminal activity can come with a degree of risk and danger. So can both of you describe the risk assessment process, like from the moment you either receive a tip or receive a pitch to the moment you send someone out into the field? How do you determine the level of risk that you're willing to tolerate or to even take on a story?
Can I go first? Yeah. For the risk assessment, usually we all of the editors in Mongabay will have like we have a special meeting with the journalists before they go into the field, and also we're gonna ask him or her about with the several question, such as who's gonna be your sources, who's gonna accompany you to in the field, who's the contact on the field, and what the vehicle that you will use for the reporting, and what tools do you use. After that, we're gonna have like a list about the his or her activities during the reporting, and also we're gonna have like an agreement several checking every day, so we will know about their condition during the field reporting.
Great, thank you, Rico. Daniela?
Yes, for us it's pretty similar. We have like this safety protocol that we really take seriously. So first we assess like whether field reporting is actually viable, as I was mentioning. We of course have a meeting with the journalist to see the location he would like to travel to, but we also have like a lot of conversations with local people, with local leaders to see if traveling is actually viable or not. And if we decide it is, we maintain like a remote monitoring of the moves or of the reporter during the whole trip. So we have an app. I don't remember now the name of the app, but it actually tracks the location of the reporter, even though if there's no internet connection. But when it gets again to an internet connection, it like show us the route that he's covering. Of course, we know previously the route that the reporter will take, and we know in which places the reporter will have like signal and connection, and in which one uh, he won't or she won't. And we also have local sources that know like the movement of the reporter, and that can tell us if, for example, the journalist needed to be in one location at 6 p.m. and it's already 8 p.m. and he or she hasn't arrived there yet. They'll like call us and send some alerts to see if we can like solve something from distance. So we like have like all the time active monitoring of their movements, and we have some emergency local contacts, and we know the places they'll be visiting and the time he will or she will arrive to those locations, so that like help us to reduce the chances of things like of bad things to happen, or to maintain like a little bit of a control of the situation and know what's happening in the territory.
Great, thank you. So we're approaching the end here, and this will just be a summary to sort of highlight the key lessons that you want to leave journalists with today about how to report on nature crime, and how they can also work across beats or geographies to cover these complex stories. So what are some of the key things that you want reporters to keep in mind when reporting on nature crime?
You can go, Rico, if you want.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. Yeah, I think preparation is everything. So the reporters need to do a lot of research for the topic they want to cover for the nature crime. It is, yeah, and also he or she needs to measure, uh, is it possible or not to go with the topic, and if the editors give a green light. So it is our duty as an editor to prepare the journalist with a lot of preparation, like conducting a workshop, and give them a lot of resources, like a knowledge about how to use a spatial mapping, and also how to use tools for spatial photography. And also after that, the editors need to conduct the risk assessment about the reporting before the reporters going to the field. And it is also important to have local resources, like what Daniela said. We need to know who's gonna be our sources, who's gonna be our a company for the journalists. he or she needs to knows the area really well, so the journalists don't go with don't get confused when they go to the field and didn't get what uh, uh, didn't get what they want to see or find.
Great. Thank you, Daniela.
Yes, I think what we have learned of this fellowship and of our process, like covering environmental crime in the Amazon and in the ocean, is that it has been like really challenging, but also a very inspiring process because it shows why journalism matters when it comes to uncover these crimes. So I would like to highlight some key lessons that were very useful and very important for us also as the ones that Rico mentioned. First, we think it's essential to understand the legal framework in each country because we cover huge regions and each country has different regulations. So it's important to clearly identify what is and what is not considered an environmental crime in the area we're covering. But also, journalists should, as Rico was saying, review everything that has been already published about the issue they want to cover and the location they want to cover, because that really helps to identify gaps and to understand what new angle or contribution your investigation can bring. So I think that's really important. Another important lesson for us is that environmental crimes evolve very quickly. Organized crime is constantly adapting and finding new routes and reinventing its operation. They are even using crypto assets now to move money. So these are no longer just local dynamics, they are increasingly international and transnational. And with the price of the gold as high as it is right now, it has become like a business opportunity for drug traffickers and organized crime groups to invest in illegal mining to launder their money. So now we can see that these illegal activities are already interconnected. So journalists need to stay updated to understand how these networks operate and to learn how to trace their routes and their activities through their territory. We would also strongly recommend, as Rico was saying, building a diverse network of sources that includes, of course, indigenous and local communities, but also authorities, but also police and military sources that investigate these crimes on territory, and scientists and experts that are doing such an amazing job understanding these problematics and their impacts in the ecosystem. So all that big networks of sources would work really well on their investigations. So um, beyond that, I think that we were mentioning already the thing about the protocol, the safety protocol, because as you've seen, these are often very dangerous investigations. So I'll just add that it's crucial to develop and implement these safety protocols before going into the field every time. And finally, I think there's another key lesson for us during this time, and is that these stories can't be done alone. Journalism is not longer a one person job, and behind every investigation, there's a team, there's people coordinating logistics, there's people thinking about safety, there's people helping to find sources, and of course, an editor who tells you what's missing and to pushing and that's pushing to make the story better. So now more than ever, I'll end with that. I think that journalism needs to be collaborative.
Thank you very much, both. I have one final question before we move on to while we're waiting for some audience questions to come in, and that's what areas of criminal activity do you think that more reporters should look into? Because obviously there's lots of different kinds of criminal activity that's happening in nature. What are some of the, I would say, stories that need to be told more or looked into? Are there any gaps in coverage that should be addressed?
I will start by saying that usually in Latin America, we cover a lot the Amazon region, but there are also a lot of other important regions that doesn't have that much participation in news and in the agenda. For example, the Chocó biogeographical or the ocean. So there are a lot of other locations that usually don't receive that much attention, but that are also really important in terms of biodiversity and of conservation, but also because there are a lot of activities such as illegal mining or deforestation happening there. And there is not much attention in those kind of topics, and also in oceans, because if it's hard to develop investigations in the forest or in the Amazon, in the ocean, I think it's harder because of the distance, because of the money you need to go there, because there are like vast areas with no connection and it's difficult to get there. So I think we should also put more eyes on what's happening on the ocean, because that's a lot of what's happening also in environmental crimes, illegal fishing, um, the traffic of species. So I think I would recommend to have some attention also in those other areas in Latin America.
Enrico, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna add for the Indonesian context. A lot of eyes needs to see what happened in eastern part of Indonesia, because there's a lot of project that happen in eastern part of Indonesia. The government have like they try to open the forest for the national projects, such as for the food security, but we don't know about what happened with the timber from the forest that they deforested. So I think it is more in Indonesia. We need to dig more and investigate more about what happened with the timber from the national project from the government in eastern part of Indonesia. There's something that we've been missing so far. Uh, even a lot of CSOs don't have an eyes about what happened with the timber from that.
Thank you very much, Rico. Okay, so we do have a question here, and I'm not sure if this can be answered on this panel, but we'll give it a go. So the question is, how can environmental protectors report high-level crimes in Latin America without being targeted? Yeah, so I'm not. Daniela, do you have anything to add to that question?
It's a hard question, but I think I would say that maybe one of the ways to still reporting on these issues is to make alliances in the people that are in the ground with journalists like us that are maybe in other cities or in other countries, or covering in from different locations and that are not like directly exposed to the threats that those people that are in the territory have. So I don't know, I think I would suggest to build this strong network between local people and journalists and scientists, so that the target is just not one person, but that the coverage could be like from a bigger network, and the attention could be like in other focus that in the people that are living in the territory.
Thank you for answering that, Daniela. I mean, obviously the context for that question was Latin America, but is there an Indonesian contextual answer that you would have to share in that regard, Rico?
Yeah, according to our experience in Indonesia, I think they need to have a special relationship with the journalists. We're not the answer of everything, but we will try our best to cover everything that wrong. And when we found a special topic that maybe related to the public, and also related to the government, we will help them with everything we can, especially using our specialty, producing a story, uh, whether it is from the online media or broadcast media. So it's important to build a network with journalists and with another CSO that maybe have a special concern about that.
Great. Thank you very much, Rico. And for those who are listening, if you have any more questions, we'll give this about 30 more seconds to a minute, and then we'll go ahead and close it down. But while we're waiting, is there anything else that our panelists would like to share with audiences listening right now?
You can go, Rico.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. Maybe I just share in this webinar two topics about what we've been doing so far. But we have about four, eight stories about nature crime that needs to be anticipated, because we're gonna cover about the illegal trafficking of gabbon in Aceh, and also another related, like what Daniela said, about illegal fishing. Uh, when there's an issue about the using of the about the fish bone, a shark bone to for the medicine in Indonesia. And also we have another topic about the deforestation inside the nickel mining. So maybe the readers need to wait for a couple of weeks before the story published, but we're gonna make sure that the story is really, really great. Thank you.
Yes, I
Thanks,
would
Rico.
just add, thank you, Rico. In the same line that we published our first like round of investigations, but there are more coming in the next couple of weeks and months. So I would say like keep in touch to see what we're doing to cover environmental crimes in Latin America. But also we want to hear from you. And as you were mentioning at the beginning, Mike, we're also looking for stories around the region of what's happening in different locations. We try to see what's happening everywhere, but usually we can't. So it's good to see what people and what our journalists are seeing in different parts of the region. And we're happy to hear what they want to tell also.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Well, I don't see any more audience questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar there. I just want to say thank you to Daniela and Rico for joining us and providing such insightful information on this very hard to do type of reporting. If any of the audience wants to read these investigations, I will hyperlink them in the show notes of this webinar on YouTube specifically. That will take about 24 hours from now. I'll have that up for you. If you missed any of this webinar, obviously don't worry about it, because the whole thing will be on YouTube in perpetuity, as our other webinars are. If you miss any webinar, you can always go back and check it out. And again, if you missed this at the top, I recommend that you subscribe to our webinar newsletter. So go to mongabay.com, go to the upper right-hand corner of the screen, click on newsletters and find the webinar newsletter. If you want to be regularly informed about our webinars or anything we do at Mongabay, you can always follow us on social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, Threads, Mastodon, and Blue Sky. That is all the time we have for today, and I hope I see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.